How did I go from television into becoming a professional speaker? They don't look up the name of my company, they look up my name.
Yeah.
I have to allow these people not to necessarily connect with me, but to connect with themselves and with each other.
You know, in life, there are people that you come across that are defining for that moment in your life. And today, I want to talk about you and your journey as an entrepreneur, an author, a writer, a speaker, a motivator, a dude who works with some of the biggest and most successful leaders in the world. So let's talk about your journey, because it's taken some pretty twisty turns lately.
It has taken twisty turns. It's interesting because people want to know how I got from my first career in television as a producer and writer. How did I go from television into becoming a professional speaker? And it actually isn't that disconnected as you might think, because when I was in college, I got a scholarship for speaking, right? I competed. But it wasn't a career back then, so I didn't even think about it. So I ended up traveling right after college for a year, came back. A friend of mine said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I think I'm going to go back and study international business in Austria or something like that." And she said, "Well, there's this job open at Channel 9, the local NBC station." I'm like, "Okay, sounds like fun." I go and just meet the anchors and everything. So I went and interviewed, and the fact of the matter is that Denver is a large television market, right? It's in one of the top 20 ADIs. And so they want people with experience. But the news director and the executive producer, they liked me because I wasn't nervous, because I didn't think that I was going to get this job. And also because it was just fun. You know, it was so spur of the moment. The day I was there was the day that Channel 9 became the first television station in the country to be number one, bar none, throughout the entire United States. It's never happened again in terms of share. They had a 52% share of the entire ADI. Yeah, it was huge. So I was there, and they're handing out envelopes with money in them as bonuses to everybody. And they hand me one. I'm like, I'm just interviewing. They're like, "Here's $20 for coming in." So I remember having to tie together what I had just done and why I was there. And I didn't really know why I was there, other than I could write. I knew I could write because language was a part of my undergrad. It was also something I tutored as a second language for Vietnamese and English and language, the whole language lab and all that kind of thing, teaching myself how to do weird things with words. So I knew I could write. And when they interviewed me, they just said, "What makes you think that you can take the pressure of, big-time television news? Things are falling apart and anchors are screaming at you because you just wrote something badly. What makes you think you can take the pressure?" I'm like, "I don't know, because I don't know really what that pressure is here, but I'll tell you one thing. Last year, I was in a group called Up With People, right? Travels around the world, sings, does shows. And we were in Albuquerque, and we had a stadium filled with 10,000 people. And after the first act ended, the cast director comes to me and he said, "You're opening with the solo of the second act." And I was a mediocre singer, but I could do it. And I said, "But I don't know the song. I never learned it because it wasn't one I was ever on stage for." And he goes, "You got 15 minutes, so you got to go learn it." So I had 15 minutes to get up, sing, and make it all seem like that's what they came to pay for. And so that's the kind of pressure that I was under. And he said, "I like that." And they didn't hire me.
Right.
They had to hire the experienced guy.
But
and then a month later they did.
This story, I think, is so Scott Halford, because at one point, I don't know, you were speaking, I think, in Athens about creativity. Your microphone shit the farm on the stage. Remember? Right. But I said, you're an entrepreneur and you're a writer. And you said, "Oh, no, I'm a performer." Right. And I just can you touch on that? Because, and we'll go deeper, because I actually don't believe you're a performer. I believe that you are much more philosophical than that. But let's talk about that part of your career, because as an entrepreneur, you are your product, right?
I
The
am.
value of your company resides with you. So let's talk about like that part of your journey. Like you have always been sort of a solopreneur, right? Like,
Right. I had a business partnership for 20 years.
right.
We created a company that had value outside of me. But when the branders went and interviewed clients, they found out they don't look up the name of my company, they look up my name.
Yeah.
Which is just really, it's a strange thing, right?
Right.
Yeah. So the strange thing that is this business is that first off, you have to be ready for anything. And so performing is just kind of it's a euphemism in my mind for just having to be able to be ready and still look like you know what you're doing.
Right.
And, I work with executives at the very top tier of organizations, and they've seen a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And they get tired of the after dinner mint speaker who comes, and it tastes good while you're there and nothing sticks after they leave. And I always vowed never to be that. So my material in neuroscience has teeth, right? It's got neuro teeth. But the bigger thing is that these are people who don't want to be there.
Right.
They feel hostage oftentimes. Even if they're in a nominated program, they're like, what's this person? He's going to be with me all day maybe.
Right.
And I have to be able to pull out of that audience the personalities and the energy that is being given to me, and allow these people not to necessarily connect with me, but to connect with themselves and with each other.
Yeah.
And it's oftentimes the very first time that they actually shake hands with themselves, and it's profound. So in order to get them to that soupy space and to that place where they're willing to sit back and have a little aesthetic arrest where they just go,
yeah.
they have to be entertained a little bit.
And that's, so we should also like mention that the name of your book is Activate Your Brain.
Yes.
And it is like, it can be a life-altering experience to read this book. And when we were hold it up.
Look at that active.
Yeah, here we go. Got it?
I got it. It's orange.
Activate your brain. Everybody needs to do it once a day or more.
That's
Actually,
right.
probably more.
Yeah.
And when we were prepping for this interview, we talked about like you, right? And your journey as a human and an entrepreneur and a brain activator. And you were talking a little bit about some self-discovery you went through post-COVID, or actually maybe during COVID, and how, because you know what you know about neuroscience, right? You were able to identify some pretty, a little bit of ugliness in some of your weaknesses. And these are your words. I am not calling them ugly. And some really cool strengths as well as an entrepreneur. So can we talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I've had, since COVID, it's been, my life's been chock full of ups and downs, hills and valleys. But it's all, I try not to be so philosophical that I sound sophomorish.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound like I'm just going like, oh, everything's awesome and hunky-dory. I have had a heck of a year in the last year, 2023. I was on my way to Saudi Arabia to go to speak for the Ministry of Health. I'm in London. I'm changing airplanes between London and Saudi Arabia to go into Riyadh. And I show the ticket to the people going here, you go there, you go there. And she goes, oh, you go over here. And I'm going into this security area with a bunch of people from India. Well, they have babies like hanging off of them, and they have bags full of liquid, right, for the babies. It took forever for them to go through. Well, I had to go to the bathroom. And I got to the other side, and I gathered my things, and it was about 45 minutes later, gathered my things, went to the woman just outside and said, closest restroom. She goes, it's upstairs. I'm like, that's it? She goes, yeah. And I'm going up the escalator, and this is, I'm embarrassed to say, but not. I mean, it is what it is. It happened. And there was nothing I could do. And I basically wet myself right there. And for the first time in my life as a man, I was like just to the core humiliated.
Yeah.
Because I just felt like, whoa. And I got behind this kiosk and I just stood there, and then I finally found family restroom and got the air blown right on my body. Saudi Arabia, that was January of 2023. And when I got home, I had a few other programs. I couldn't go up into the stage. I had to stand in front.
And that's your livelihood. Like, you have to stand on the stage.
And I just made it so that can I come out front and get to know these people? The morning that I was speaking in Long Beach at an organization's big sales kickoff, I got up in the morning and I could not button my pants and I couldn't button my shirt. And I started sweating because how am I going to get dressed?
Yeah.
So I went down to the audio guy really early and I just said, this is really weird, but would you help me? And I said, I've got this neurological thing happening. And that was the understatement. From then on, it just went, I thought I had ALS because I was losing function every day. And by March, I thought, my time is here. Saw a doctor, neurologist, and he goes, you don't have ALS. You have a other bad disease that it's good news. And that is a thing called CIDP. And it messes with it's neuropathy, and it demyelinates and all kinds of balance things. And so finally I got put on an immunotherapy that is working. But then I had to take on a second career arguing with insurance companies and organizing doctors and just really having to take charge of my life. The things that I found during that very profound time and still find out is when I don't get what I need or want as fast as I would have given it to me, I get cranky really easy. I used to have a poster on my bedroom door that my mom put there. It said, had a big Great Dane. It said, "I want what I want when I want it," and I find that to be really ugly. It's demanding.
Yeah.
It's unkind, and it's not very grateful. When it's like, they're doing everything they can help. They're taking care of their bodies as well when I need something now. So I saw that side. I also saw this side where it's not that I wanted to give up. It's just that I didn't have the energy because remember January, by the time February rolled around, February 17th, I bought a brand new house that didn't have stairs. By April 5th, I'd sold the house that did have stairs. I had to cancel programs. I had to find out about this disease. I had all kinds of things happening in the periphery that just kept building and building and building. I became a walking laboratory for everything I write about.
Yeah.
The stress and what it does to your body. So the ugly characteristics that I found about myself, I decided I'm going to sit back and get to know that person because I don't like that person at all, but I need to kind of soften the edges of it. The parts that I do like of me, I don't know that they were present before the ugly person was here. The part I like about me is the person that's showing up kind of to replace that ugly person. I like the gentler, more gracious, kind, mellow, grounded, all those things. Because I have to be. Otherwise, I'm going to trip all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that comes with experience and wisdom and like catastrophic health issues, right? And, it happens in life where you get sick. And it happens to entrepreneurs, young and old. And, I think that what you're talking about, like that whole moment of introspection, like unexpected things happen, but they should never slow you down, right? Like you are a walking example. Plus, I just want to throw in like the new you emerging from, COVID and this disease. You're a very snappy dresser. And you have kick-ass glasses, right? From the ashes, fashion arises, or
gotta put that fashion up.
Something like that.
Billy Crystal, it's better to look good than it is to feel good.
Right. So let's talk about that. Not Billy Crystal, although he's very funny. Let's talk about that resilience. That part of you that like we talked before this, like you are resilient, and you keep getting up, you keep dusting off, and you keep going. And, I think for entrepreneurs who are listening, like, how do you stay motivated and what inspires you?
It's such a great question because there are days that I just don't feel resilient at all, but I know I am because I'm moving forward. I know that when all of this happened, I had to, for the first time in a over 30-year career of speaking, canceled 4 engagements. Bam, 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 one right after the next. I took the summer off, and I just like, oh, am I giving up? And what's going to be on the other side? And are people going to want to hire me? I was being hired back by clients who had met me before, and one who had met me the prior October, and now it's April, and they're seeing this degeneration in my body, and I'm having to, stand up in front of audience and say, like, if I drop something, those of you in the front row, there's a competition for you to get to it first, and you'll win something. If not, you're going to see me breakdance. I had to start being able to address what I had.
Yeah. I'm
not embarrassed by it because it's nothing to be embarrassed by. No. I had to address what I had, but not dwell on it because it's not my therapy is in front of these audiences. And I wanted them to understand that a flawed individual physically can still do really cool things, because I think the world, and I think entrepreneurs really need to pay attention to this, is that, if you are a competitive in any way, shape, or form, and entrepreneurs are, if you're competitive, you are constantly looking for the best, to be the best, to do the best, have the best. All of a sudden, bam, you don't ask for it. It's nothing you would ever request, like what I have. It comes to you, and I had to sit there and think, what am I going to do that is adjunct to what I'm doing? I can't get on airplanes. Like, I was traveling 200,000 miles a year. I still travel, but nothing close to that. And the energy changes of what I do, and just getting my head into the game of taking care of myself. I didn't file taxes this year until late, and knowing that because I couldn't gather all my things together. And thankfully, maybe they don't want me to say this, but the IRS was really, really, really empathetic. They just went.
Really?
Yep. They were very empathetic.
That's a soundbite you don't hear every day.
Well, they give you a first run. If you've never ever missed your taxes, I'd never missed them. So you get one, and they forgave all the penalties that would have added up, and every single one of them. And it was just like that, boom, 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 boom.
That's
not a lot.
Amazing.
They were kind, but the thing was that I had all those things piling up, and the interesting thing was that my brain kind of felt not resilient, because I'm sitting there thinking, I have to get this home together. I have to get my life together, doctors together, body. Am I ever going to get this very expensive immunoglobulin infusions? And so I put things on hold.
Yeah.
But I didn't. I think that I think true entrepreneurs know in their heart of hearts that they might run into a wall. They might get a pivot like I have. And for me, the pivot begged questions of me to ask myself, and that was, am I going to retire? I'm 64, right? Am I going to retire next month? Am I going to retire? Am I going to reset? Am I going to renovate?
Yeah.
And remodel? What am I going to and what am I reing to? And will there be a market? And I'm 64, and all the energy that you have, for those of you listening who are 25 and 30 years old, do not ever take that energy for granted, because it is a gift that propels a lot of mediocre stuff out there, right?
Yeah.
You get this energy, and you push those products through that would not have made it on their own without that energy. Yeah. And that's the vast majority of things I think out there. So that's what I ran into. And that resilience that you talk about, it's been mentioned to me a lot. And it's hard to know, how much someone who would go through this who's not resilient, what would they do? But
it's also like, what choice do you have?
Right.
Like, sometimes it's like you either can be resilient or, drop down on the floor and wallow, right? So it's like, it's resilience under duress, and it's a matter of grace. And I think that, the way that you have responded to this disease, which just came out of nowhere and is very recent, is, a real testament to who you are, but also to what resilience can look like. Even if your, IRS bills are stacking up, even if you don't know how you're going to I think that there are so many lessons that shake out from your story and your experience. And one of them is, and you and I have talked about this, authenticity, right? Remember, we were just talking about this. Like, what and the actual fuck is authenticity,
Exactly.
right? And you were like, well, it's being yourself. And I'm like, well, what is that? I mean, are any of us really ourselves? Like what, because in entrepreneurship and branding, right now, the hashtag for all of it is authenticity. Right?
Is that what's going on out there?
Well, I just made that up, but it's an it's an example, right?
It. Sounds like good advertising.
In order to have a good brand, you must be authentic.
Well, I think that's right.
Right, but what does that mean?
I agree. There's a formula for trust that is neurologically based, right? And everybody wants to add things like honesty and authenticity,
right,
and things like integrity to the formula for trust. If you come from the walk of life I do, you use a scientific model, and there's no way in the world that authenticity and honesty and those things, they're wonderful things, and they might be a part of someone's trust and their own measurement, but in science we have to look at things that are universal to the world, right? They show up in all cultures of society. They're repeatable. You can see them and you can measure them, and you can't measure someone's authenticity because who says?
But you can suss out when they're not authentic.
And that's just it. It's kind of hygiene therapy, right? I don't know when you are clean, but I do know when you're not.
Exactly.
And so
it's like a vibe.
It's a vibe. It's totally a vibe. And you've been with people. We've all been with people, right? Where you sit down with them and you just walk away and you go, that was just so not hard.
Yep.
It was just they're centered. They're grounded. They don't need all of the attention that we do when we're not as grounded. Like pick me. They're still an onion. Yeah. They didn't have all the layers peeled back in the first 20 minutes, and they're gracious. Then they're typically really great listeners. Authentic. Those are traits could be of anyone, but authenticity. Being yourself, but on purpose, is one of the hardest things to do, and that's what you have to do in business. You have to be yourself, but on purpose, because you're getting in front of a client and you might not feel like it. Carol Channing did 2,200 some shows on Broadway of Hello Dolly. There were tons of shows she did not feel like showing up, but those people were paying over $100 for a ticket.
Yeah.
She brought in the technical skill that she so finely honed, and as an entrepreneur, I think those skills can sometimes be mistaken for being inauthentic because you did this and you did that. It seemed choreographed. Well, what it allows you to do is to build a rapport with a client, one that they're expecting, and if you have a cold or you feel like crap or you just don't even like the customer, I think it's all right. And I'm going to get a lot of crap for this, to fake it till you make it. I think that because
but not
the brain
like
does
Elizabeth
that.
Holmes, right? Not
No.
Theranos
Not
way.
Elizabeth Holmes.
Right.
But in presentation skills, when we teach presentation skills, we get people to do things that feel really wooden. And the only reason they feel wooden is because they don't do them. And so then we get them to build a habit around them. And it's not that we're going to get them to walk mechanically or use their arms mechanically.
Is that like a brain thing?
It's a brain thing.
Right? Like there's a neurology behind. It's like practicing your lines, right? Like going back to the theater analogy, right? That
over and over again.
roteness. And I think that's a really good point and a really good exercise for entrepreneurs. Like you can't just riff your way through authenticity, right? Sometimes it has to be practiced. It's not natural to everyone. I just really don't think that it is.
I think, years ago I had a shrink. And she was one of those medical intuitives that they were measuring at Duke because they could guess somebody's malady just by she was.
That's freaky.
It was freaky. She was really, really cool. And so she'd walk in to the office right in the waiting room. She'd come up, put her hand on my shoulder. I'll see you in 5 minutes. And she goes and sits down. She writes out these 3x5 cards of things that she's channeling or whatever. And you go in and she's like, so. And like, what? And she just gave me no clue that she was as clever as she was, but also that she was as tough as she was.
Yeah.
Because she's like, you're steamrolling things. She goes, look, when you come in here, I'm not sure if I can swear on this, but I'm gonna.
We've already,
because
the seal has been broken.
She said this. She said, when you come in here, last night, if you fucked 100 monkeys, I want to know the looks on their face when you did it. And I'm like, okay. And so she went down this path and she said, have you ever seen the kabuki, the
mask.
The masks? Mm-hmm. And the person underneath could be completely frowning and the mask is smiling or vice versa. And she said, we all wear masks. We have different things that we protect ourselves from. And she said, you have a few hundred. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she said, there's not a person that you meet that doesn't have the impression of you that you don't want them to have. And I'm like, that's a bad thing? She said, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And she said, do you ever just get tired of being something that you think that they want? I'm like, well, I don't think that I'm being something I'm not. She said, watch that. See what happens. Well, move forward. And I begin to look at what my life is all about. And as I grow and get older, I absolutely wore masks. I absolutely manufactured people. I completely allowed myself to get in there and not so much manipulate, but let them see the me that I wanted them to see. And they didn't see the other part, right? Yeah. Everything was thrown in the closet. The house looked perfect kind of thing. And now I don't have the energy for that. Yeah. And it's not a frenetic energy. It's an energy that I don't wish to assign any energy to something that I'm not. I've gotten past the place of feeling like, wow, they're going to think
I think you're kind of at the phase of, who gives a shit what they think of me. I mean, I think for the first time since I've known you, like you're kind of at that place where like that really true you is emerging and, becoming something.
I've had to, when I have spoken for an audience and said, we need to take a rest, go to the restroom break, and barely make it to the restroom, sometimes didn't. And it's not that I don't give a shit about what people think. I care about what people think. I just am not going to change what I'm doing based on what they say if I don't agree with it. I used to be malleable to all of that. And so, I live in a world of people and at the same time, I used to think of my product as something that was only as good as other people thought.
Yeah.
If I got good ratings, well, if you've got products out there as an entrepreneur and the only time that you feel good about what you're doing is when other people tell you that you're good. Because if they don't, you think you're bad.
Yeah.
That roller coaster, that left the train station so slowly for me. And finally I got to the place of thinking, authenticity. What in the world is it? It's just understanding that I can't please every single person I come across.
Right.
And I absolutely am not able to sell my product to every person. I'm not going to be, I could be the sweetest peach in the tree, but if you don't like peaches, boom, forget about it. And I think as entrepreneurs and as people who are competing for space, it's easy to get performing. It's easy to get and become something else. I think what you have to do is really figure out what did you fall in love about entrepreneurship? Is it I know entrepreneurs who did a widget over here, a widget over there. I have a friend who had a publishing company, and then he made peanut butter, and then children's clothes, and wrote a children's book. Now he's in a different thing, and he's awesome at it. He's great at starting up companies. They're interesting to him, but the thread is not plastics or speaking or I have a thread, and have for my entrepreneurs has been around the thing I do, and either which, regardless of the direction you go, I think my opinion is that the authenticity lies in how much you can slog through the crap when you don't want to do it. You can get on the airplane when you just feel like crap, and you show up. And when you show up, you don't just participate. You participate with quality and consistency, and you never let anyone know that this is a bad day for you because they don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Right?
Let's talk about that for a second. Like the whole, one of the major obstacles for entrepreneurs, startups, founders, humans, just people and dudes, is a fear of failure. right? The fear of failure will stop you in your tracks from doing anything worth doing or exploring. And so, what is your advice to entrepreneurs who are so afraid of failing that they never start?
I would say that there are a number of things that they could do, but I think that people have it, in my opinion, have it quite backwards, especially neurologically. When you look at the neural architecture of the brain, people say, we learn from our failures. We don't really learn from our failures. We learn what not to do because of our failures. You don't repeat your failures, hopefully. The only way you get a neural pathway in the brain to become something and learn something is to do it repetitively about 1,000 times. So you're not going to repeat the failure 1,000 times. Failures are simply bumper guards to tell you, not on that side of the road. No, get back on the road. Yeah. And then you go over here. And if people would stop beating the crap out of themselves when they stumble and fall, all that is a way for the universe to tell you, not that direction. And if you insist upon it, where we become really egg-headed and I think really, really stubborn is entrepreneurs believe that this is my baby, this is the thing I'm selling. They get stuck in it, and they should fear the fear of failing because they're probably not listening to a market. They're probably not listening to advice. Yeah. They're so invested in the baby. I think if you understand that success comes from success and that success only happens by not, you've heard the adage, you're either winning or you're learning. Yeah. One of the two. And if entrepreneurs would adopt that idea that if you're not, ahead of the market, then you're learning how to get there. Yeah. And you're not losing. And if you go in with that mindset, everything shows up in spades. The brain will absolutely afford you that. You look for shit, you'll get shit. It's just a part of the brain. The brain can only attend to two things really very, very heavily at one time. And attention goes to what's directly in front of it or what you tell it to attend to. And that's it. So if you're looking at bad TV and you have bad people you're surrounding yourself with, that's what you see, you attend to that. Or you attend to what you tell your brain to see. It can't pay attention to everything. It's when you bought that purple Volkswagen Beetle, you thought no one else in the whole world could have one, and 3 of them show up in your neighborhood. It's not that they weren't there. Your brain couldn't attend. You never attended to that. Yeah. And so it's called priming. And so when you prime the brain, it doesn't take a lot. All you're doing is you're suggesting to it, when you walk into this room of 3,000 people, I just want you to see the people with the gray shirts on, because those are the people I need to talk to. Mm. You won't see the rest of the stuff. It's kind of like looking for things in a haystack. If you don't know, if you keep forgetting that it's the needle, you won't find it because you have to have that attentional guidance in your head. Entrepreneurs would do really well to not attend to fear. You're going to fail. And if you don't think you are, you go back to a different school, do something different before you go out there. And fail, though. It's not failing. It's the failure is, in my opinion, up to you. It could be quitting being an entrepreneur. It could be success. It could be going back into a corporation and working. It could be. It's up to you to define that. But making mistakes is not a failure. Not making mistakes is not taking enough risk.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And so you have immersed yourself in a world of, so many things, geopolitics, you are immersed with some of the most influential leaders in the world. You're going to Dubai here in a couple weeks. And you have immersed with entrepreneurs all over the world. And this is such a corny question, but whatever. I'm going to ask it anyway. Meeting with these people, is there a common thread of characteristics that define successful people? Like what have you seen in some of these leaders that you've met with?
That's not a corny question at all. It's not cheesy. It's actually a really salient one. When I meet executives who are in the second, third, or fourth tier of an organization, and it's a big organization, 500,000 people in an organization, or 200,000, they take on a lot of stress. And the higher up you go, you got more responsibility. But then there becomes a point at which, when you jump into the C-suite or the senior vice president suite, the risk goes down.
Yeah.
And the pressure goes down.
Yeah.
And people don't get that the pressure, you have big decisions, you're making big money, but the pressure, the eyeballs on you are not the same eyeballs that were on you when you were, having to hold up a lot of things. So the executives who get to the top, they learn to manage the stress on the way up. The good ones understand emotional intelligence at its very core.
I think that is so key, and it gets left out of the answering of this question frequently. Explain what that is, because we've all heard the EQ and the emotional, part of leadership, but it is so true. Like when you look not only at successful people, but at successful companies and cultures, right? It's not, a spreadsheet approach to leadership, a checking of the boxes of what a culture. It is an actual emotional grab, right? Like where you are in it and you believe it. And so, talk about that emotion, the EQ of leadership.
It's huge. It's, the emotional part of your brain, the midbrain, is a 4-year-old on a playground. If you've ever gone into a mall where they have all that plastic food that kids, climb all over and get the flu and bring it home to you, where they're in their playground, if you watch 3 and 4-year-olds, they bite and they kick, right? Mm-hmm. Well, here's the interesting thing.
Some adults do that too.
Well, exactly. Well, that's because you invited them. But the children, they don't have their orbital frontal cortex aren't completely developed, so they don't have the ping pong paddles of morality, of what's right and wrong. They don't. They have parents. And if we didn't have parents stopping us, we would be biting each other and greeting today. But that's how the emotional brain is. It's a 4-year-old that will stay a 4-year-old, and it will emote in your head and sometimes out loud throughout the day. You are, if anyone out there thinks they are not an emotional being, the only way you're not is if you are dead. Everything comes through the living room of the hypothalamus in the brain. It's checked out and it says, are you going to go up to the executive part and the thinking, or are you going to stay in the emotional part of the brain? The emotional part is a kicker and a screamer. It feels everything. It senses everything. But emotions are, the balance of emotions are huge. People think of as emotions as getting mad or getting sad or being, being disappointed or things like that. You couldn't decide what color socks to put on if you didn't have a druther.
Yeah.
If you didn't care one way, and caring is an emotional tincture. Well, when you're under pressure, the emotional brain switches on, because in the emotional brain is the chief alarm, the sentinel that detects what is safe and what is not. It puts safe things over there, don't need to deal with you. It puts dangerous things right in front, and it says, what do you want to do with it? If a bear is coming after you, that amygdala sets up a whole set of neurochemistry that says, cut the cable between the executive brain. You do not talk to that executive brain. The bear's coming after you. I don't want you stopping. Oh, hey, bear, could we have a discussion about this before you, crawl all? No, you're going to run, you're going to freeze, or you're going to hit back, right? Yeah. Fight, flight, or freeze. That cuts off the executive thinking. Executives, they get up into the Hollywood suites, and they have many of them, not all of them, and certainly not, I don't think the majority, have bullied their way up. They manage upward and they crap downward. Yeah. And they get very, very good at getting results because they intimidate and bully people. Yeah. That's where the derailment begins to happen, is because when you reach a certain state of infamy and responsibility and of the stature, what ends up happening is people get to decide whether they're going to support you. And if you've done nothing but diminish them and not enlarge, emotional intelligence is simply, it's as you said, it's not a cookbook formula. So many situations where you want to strike out and you just want to say something, but you hold back and you don't. And that's the better way to go. And it does not feel nearly as good as if you would have said that pithy, snarky little crappy thing
Right.
and gotten off of your chest and showed them, right? And then you walk away and, 3 minutes later, you feel like an asshole because you said something that was not gracious, it wasn't befitting of you, and it wasn't the high road. So you looked like the person you were just criticizing. EI allows you to make decisions. It allows you to be able to manage your own emotions, notice other people's, which is really huge, because of the huge lack of self-awareness amongst executives. And it allows you to be able to set goals and keep them, problem solve. And the big thing is this, is that the overall kind of indicator that affects every one of the 16 competencies of the different models, but the biggest one out there has 15 competencies plus the well-being indicator.
Yeah.
And that thing affects everything. So if you're an entrepreneur and you make your way up and you're making all kinds of money and you're never at home and your kids don't get to see you on their birthdays and you're traveling and you're making money, living in a nice place, driving a nice car, you are impressing people except for they don't know you. Your wife doesn't know you, your husband doesn't know you, your children don't know you. You get up there, you have done nothing but basically barter everything out of your life so that you could have a position and cash.
Yeah.
When you get there, you're going to be met with some really interesting decisions. And most of what most people do in that position is they lack emotional self-awareness, emotional intelligence, because they're not interacting with their loved ones. They're not saying, you know what, you're more worth it than that. They're not creating parameters that people with high EI do. There's hope.
Is that, so like just to stay on the whole EI thing, is that a generational thing? Like are Gen Xers do they practice less EQ than Gen Z or millennials? Like is that changing? Like I feel like, I don't know, right? I feel
we
like
all want to say so, don't we?
Like as a Gen Xer, I was motivated to be at the top of everything, right? Like we were competitive, we swam in the ditch with the leeches, we didn't have a lot of parental supervision.
Love it.
But right, like is that changing or is that like, what is the science of that?
Well, I think, the hard thing is that in a digital world where we're required to digitize, but we're also interacting with our digital implements in ways that we're not looking up. Kids are going onto the playgrounds with their phones, and they're not interacting. The person who's bullying them, they're not talking to them. They're texting other people. They're not breaking up with each other. They're
No,
and these are going to be the heads of HR.
Yeah.
Coming up soon. But the big thing is this: is that when digitization came along, and we began to interact via typed words and not the emotional awareness of looking at you, I can read you because I have mirror neurons. You feel sad, I feel sad.
Yeah.
You hold a cup of coffee, my brain ignites a cup of coffee. What's happening with kids, we think, right now is that they're not being held to the same kind of place except for in one thing, and you mentioned it. When you competed, and I competed in high school, in college, we competed with our local people, and sometimes out there, out there into the more global world. Kids born today are instantly global. Their competition is vast. They don't have time to learn manners. They don't have time. All they have time to do is to either figure out how to manage the anxiety that their parents are giving them, they're giving them, and to manage the competition if they want to go anywhere and be anything in the world. That's what they're up against right now, and it's a scary thing. So I think if entrepreneurs look back and they think I'm competitive, and I'm going to keep on going and being competitive, competition is awesome. You don't have to crush anyone to be better.
Yeah.
And if that's all you do, you're probably not better. You're just
a crusher.
You're waiting for them to be a mistake, right? Yeah.
I cannot thank you enough
Absolutely.
for taking time and sharing your story and your
Hope
journey.
it's helpful. Everybody will have their own. But
it's a hard one, and I'm really proud of you for sharing it because you're going to help a lot of people. So.
Well, thank you. I think you will too with this. This is a great program. Thank you.
Thank you.